Hey everyone, and welcome. Today we're going to take a really close look at a word we all think we know like the back of our hand family. But what happens when you put that simple, everyday idea under a microscope? Well, let me tell you, it gets way more complicated and a whole lot more interesting than you'd ever guess. Seriously, just for a second, what pops into your head when you hear the word family? Is it your parents? Your siblings? Maybe a big, noisy holiday dinner? For all of us, it's a super personal thing. But if we want to understand how it acts as the bedrock for, well, all of society, we kind of have to zoom out from our own feelings and take a look at the official blueprint. And to do that, we need a solid starting point, a baseline. We need that official textbook definition that sociologists use before they dive into all the wild and wonderful ways a family can actually look. Okay, so this definition might sound a little clinical, but every word is there for a reason. It gives us three key things to work with: a biological connection, living under the same roof, and economic cooperation, which is what that common kitchen part is all about. By nailing these down, we can see the family as this core building block of society. But of course, that simple definition is really just the beginning. Out in the real world, family structures are incredibly diverse. So let's jump in and explore some of the most common models you'll find. We'll kick things off with the models that are probably the most familiar to you, the ones that make up that immediate core family group. All right, this is the classic. You know, the one you see in TV shows and movies all the time. Two parents and their kids all living together as a single unit. The key phrase here is dependent children. This whole structure is basically built around the very focused job of raising the next generation. Now here's a subtle but really important twist on that: a conjugal family. On the outside, it looks just like a nuclear family, but the big difference is the focus. Here, the bond between the spouses is seen as the absolute center of the family. All those connections to grandparents, aunts, uncles, cousins, they're based more on choice and feeling, not on some kind of rigid family duty. But you know, not all families are so small and inwardly focused. What happens when the household gets bigger and weaves this much larger web of relationships? Well, that brings us to our next group of models. Now, with this one, the whole idea of family life just shifts completely. Just picture it. You have several brothers, all their spouses, and all of their children living together as one big economic unit. Property is shared, major decisions are made together, and it's all typically guided by the eldest man. In this kind of system, your blood ties are often way more important than your marriage ties. And if you take that idea of shared living even further, you get the communal family. This model is less about who's in charge and way more about how things get done. Everybody has a role, everybody chips in, and the family basically runs like a single coordinated team. It's a perfect real-world example of that whole division of labor concept. So besides just who lives together, there's another really simple way to define a family. And it all comes down to one question: who's in charge? The line of authority in a family gives us two more really distinct models. And the comparison here is pretty straightforward. In a patriarchal family, all the authority, all the power rests with the male head of the household. In a matriarchal family, you guessed it, that power is held by the female head. This one little difference can totally shape everything, from who gets the inheritance to who gets the final say on big life choices. So far, we've been looking at all these different blueprints for how families are structured. But life, as we all know, isn't always so neat and tidy. Sometimes what really defines a family isn't its structure at all, but the challenges and hardships it has to go through. This is a term sociologists use to describe a family unit where that original parental structure has been changed in a fundamental way, either because the parents have split up or because one or both of them have passed away. Now, it's really important to separate this from, the occasional family argument that we all have. A dysfunctional family is defined by something much more serious: persistent, damaging patterns of conflict, misbehavior, or even abuse that create a really unstable and harmful environment for everyone inside it. Okay, so we've looked at all these static types of families, but families don't just stay the same. They're always growing and changing. And that brings us to the family life cycle, which is kind of like a universal roadmap for a family's journey. I know this looks like a lot, but it actually tells a pretty simple universal story. It all starts with formation. That's when a couple gets married. Then the family grows during the extension phase, when kids are born. The family hits its biggest size during complete extension.
After that comes the contraction phase. This is when the adult children start to leave home, which leads to the empty nest stage of completed contraction. And finally, the whole cycle ends with dissolution, which marks the end of that original family unit. It's a journey from two to many, and eventually back to two again.
So, there you have it, 6 phases. When you put them all together, they create this predictable map that helps us see the family not just as a single snapshot, but as a living, breathing thing that grows, changes, and evolves over a whole lifetime. All right, so we've got all these labels, all these structures, all these phases. But why? Why does any of this actually matter? What's the point of breaking down the idea of family in this way? It really boils down to this. To truly get the role family plays in society, you need both pieces of the puzzle. You need the blueprint, all those different structures we talked about, and you need the timeline, that universal life cycle. One tells us what a family is at any given moment, and the other tells us the journey it's on. And together, that gives us an incredibly powerful way to see how our entire society is built. Ultimately, it all comes back to this one powerful idea. The family is the primary unit of all societies and a powerful example of social cohesion. It's so much more than just a group of people living together. It's our first training ground for life. It's where we learn to connect, to cooperate, and to form the bonds that hold everything else together. Which leaves us with one last and maybe most important question. In a world that's changing so fast, with new technology and new social norms, how are these classic definitions going to hold up? It really makes you wonder what the family blueprint is going to look like a generation from now. Something to think about. Thanks for joining me.